Greetings and salutations. It is I, Mr. Nothing, the museum curator of the weird and the strange and the host who might be a ghost. Welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all manner of strange and unusual literature that I've found in my travels. Today I wanted to talk about a book that I recently read. It's a book about the invention of a new word and the effect that it has on a school district and slowly but surely the outlying community and the nation as a whole. The book I am talking about is Frindle by Frindle by Andrew Clements. I first read Frindle in elementary school. I would consider it, alongside Holes, as one of the books that really got me interested in reading, and it's absolutely great. I've read it a couple more times. One time in my undergrad, and now even, and I've liked them each time. But I wanted to talk about some things that I noticed, so I thought I would talk about it for the channel. Which should be interesting. I got this from the local library, so once again, I'm saying please patronize your libraries because libraries are cool. Let's just get right to it. Frindle is about Nicholas Allen, a fifth grader. He's just starting fifth grade, who is described as clever and a bit silly. Thinks on the wild side of things. He reminds me a bit of Stargirl from the Stargirl series of books, in that he's more of an idea of zaniness than an actual character, but that's beside the point. Nicholas is starting the fifth grade. He has a new English teacher, her Mrs. Lorelei Granger. She's described as very strict, very homework kind of giving teacher. She loves the dictionary, so she's very focused and dedicated to her job, much to the dismay of students at times. On the first day of classes, Nick attempts to distract her from giving homework by asking her a bunch of questions about the dictionary, and she gets what he's trying to do. So she's like, oh, why don't you just, in addition to the homework, why don't you also write a report about the dictionary and get back to us on that? It's funny how she just recognizes that right away. And she challenges them on it. So the next day, Nick turns the assignment into a time waster activity and just gives them like a whole class long speech of like how the dictionary came to be and who made it and where words come from. And so as the speech is coming to an end, in an effort to waste more time, he asks Mrs. Granger, well, like, where do words come from? Who decides that dog means dog? And Mrs. Granger appropriately responds, you do, Nicholas. The fact that we say a word means this is true. The French say the dog means chien, and so that's how they decide that means woof woof, the animal that goes woof woof. So she gives an interesting speech there, and it inspires Nicholas to troll her even more. The next day in class, he gets a couple of his fellow students to go along with his plan, where he starts calling the pens that he uses Frindles. So Mrs. Granger goes along with it at first. She's like, haha, that's very funny. You're calling a name that isn't it. So very funny. But she quickly grows to be a little annoyed by it as more of the schools start using it. She challenges Nick to get people to stop using it, and he tells the principal this, he tells his parents this when they confront him about it because they feel he's being disrespectful, and he tells Mrs. Granger this, like, it's no longer my word. I have no control over it. The entire school is using it. And it causes a bit of a hullabaloo between the school district and the students. Eventually, the local newspaper gets word of it and writes a story which draws interest in the town. One of the local business owners copyrights the name Frindle and starts selling merchandise with the name on it. Eventually, this frenzy dies down, but then the local CBS affiliate, the regional CBS affiliate, decides that it's newsworthy, so they report on it, and this draws national attention to Nick, and he goes on Letterman and a bunch of other shows, like the early show, something like that. Which I'm not only realizing now how much it dates this book, because Letterman's not on TV anymore. Kids aren't going to know who Letterman is. Colbert took his job, so that's interesting. So yeah. Eventually, this frenzy dies down, as all things do, and people still use the word, but they're not really consciously aware that they're disrupting the system anymore. So Nicholas kind of moves on from this, but he still has other plans in mind. He sees that the food in the cafeteria lunchroom isn't that great, and he's thinking of doing a school lunch strike so that the students can get better food in the cafeteria. But he stopped in his tracks when he realizes, well, what if I get the same kind of attention? My parents weren't very happy with me. This might make them even more unhappy. I don't want to butt heads and make things worse than they need to be. And although the media attention was great, like, nobody wants that for a prolonged period of time. So Nick just stops himself, and he doesn't really speak out in class anymore, which Mrs. Granger is noting. And near the end of the school year, she confronts him about this and says, it's not your fault that things went the way they did. That happens whenever you try to do like grand things. I'm not mad at you. Like, it's just weird that you chose to make a word, not a word, a word. There was nothing wrong with the word pen. It did its job. So that sort of makes Nick feel better. And he ends up going on to the 6th grade, and he actually does the school lunch strike, which is successful. The story then flashes 10 years down the road, and Nick is a junior in college, and he's made a lot of money from because the copyright holder for the word Frindle shared the money with him. And although because it's like the word pen, you can't. One would think that you couldn't copyright the word pen because it's it's such widely used, but that's beside the point. He receives a package in the mail from Mrs. Granger. It has a dictionary that shows that the word Frindle has been added, so it's in the mainstream now. And she also writes him a letter where she reveals that she was on his side the whole time, and that she knew that his actions would lead to such interest and growth, and that she ultimately had to play the villain in order for things to play out the way they did. Which is interesting. I'll talk more about that in a few minutes. But I do think that's an interesting thing right there. So she says that there's no hard feelings, and that she hopes Nicholas has found it in his heart to forgive him for the way she acted years ago. And at the end of the book, Mrs. Granger receives a thing in the mail. It's a golden pen. And the note says that she's allowed to call this pen whatever she so chooses. So if she chooses to go with the dictionary word pen, then that's her choice. And if she chooses to use Frindle as a sign of friendship, that is also her choice, which I think is good because of how much she values words and making it her choice. Overall, I would say I liked this story. There are a couple things I want to note with what I observed when I was reading, in particular. One of them is the paradox of punishment. In this book, when Mrs. Granger and the school district try to punish students for using the word when it's against the rules, that ends up just drawing more attention to the word itself. That when you try to punish someone, it only generates attention towards their cause. And in a lot of cases, and especially here, the the negative attention, the punishment, is seen as a badge of honor for standing up for what you believe or acting against the norm. A good parallel to this is the current Black Lives Matter protest, where if the protest had simply happened and the cops had stayed on the sides, that would have that might have gained attention for the protest, but I think they would have died out a lot faster. But because the cops acted in such a way that they did, beating protesters, engaging in riots, starting those riots, and property damage, damaging a whole bunch of property, just hurting people in general, that gained more attention. Their attempts at punishment only brought more attention to what they're doing. And while I will not equate creating a word like Frindle to civil rights movements, the underlying message is still there, that any attempts to silence people for what they're trying to say will generally be met with more attention to that. I think you see that all the time. And one character even notes that she sees going to detention and writing, I will not call, I am writing this with a pen. Like, she uses the word Frindle, and she sees it as a badge of honor to buck the system. So that's something I noticed there. Of course, Mrs. Granger reveals at the end that she was on Nick's side the whole time, which I think is a weird message to be sending to children, the intended audience. Often when people are against you, they are advocating for their own personal cause, or they just don't like you in general. And I think it's pretty weird to say, oh, well, that person who's not on your side, who's working against you, they're actually on your side. They secretly hope you win, and I don't like that. I know it's not a general statement that Andrew Clements is making here, but it does sound like that's what he's getting at. And it also kind of like undermines Mrs. Granger's character in a lot of ways, because although she's a teacher, she's a stickler for the rules, and saying, oh, well, I didn't mind Nick like acting out. It kind of makes you wonder, like, well, who is Mrs. Granger if she doesn't have a defined personality there? But again, this is a book aimed at children, so maybe it doesn't need to be like, maybe I'm overthinking it a bit here. Who knows? One other thing that I really liked while reading this was Nick's the consequences of all this media attention and frenzy. Nick ends up he wants to engage in other things besides Frindle. He wants to lead a school lunch strike to get to improve nutrition and get better food for his fellow students. But he stops himself the moment he does that. He's like, I don't want to gain all this negative attention or even be in the spotlight for way too long. That's not good. And at one point, his parents are kind of disappointed in him because they think that he's being cruel to Mrs. Granger, kind of being a jerk with what he's doing. And I feel like that rings true to in real life for kids who are around Nick's age. Nick's in 5th grade. That's a crucial time for development, for improving yourself as an individual, for learning how creative you can be. And so I would say that telling Nick that, oh, you can't do this, you're behaving in a negative way, you're hurting other people, that's gonna lead to anxiety, depression, and stress, and that's something that you don't want to place on a child that young. So I think that Andrew Clements acknowledging that that's a factor, and then having Mrs. Granger speak to Nick, that shows great teaching on his part, and that's something that you see a lot with Andrew Clements' writing. Is he writes a lot of teachers that actively care for their students, and that's possibly because he was a teacher in the past, so who knows teaching better than him. So that's what I noticed there, and just allowing me to think with my child development psychology hat for a minute, pointing out that a child who is told that something is wrong is not going to want to do that, even if it might benefit students in the future. So overall, I would say I enjoyed this book. Maybe not as much as I did in elementary school. It seems to lack substance, but that's what you get from youth literature in general. It's no East of Eden. So yeah, I would say I would recommend this. Just reading it as a relic of the past, but also maybe give it to your children. If you have any. This is a very interesting book that might spark their curiosity and lead them to more reading down the road. If you're a bit older, like Andrew Clements does have more mature books. He has the Things Not Seen trilogy, I think it is. I've only read the first book in this series, but I might return to it because I haven't read the other two, and I've heard good things about them. Other than that, again, I enjoyed the book, but I don't have anything else to say right now. So have fun in your weird travels, and I bid you farewell.